Hello, listener. Today we're talking about one of the hottest topics, not just in the actuarial world, but across the whole world right now, artificial intelligence. How can artificial intelligence or AI help actuaries do our work? How might we as actuaries support our companies in adopting AI? And what do we need to learn so that we can leverage the benefits of AI? What will leaders need to do differently as AI becomes more mainstream in our workplaces? And the big question on everyone's lips, will AI take our jobs? Joining us for this discussion is Jared Spowart, an experienced actuary with 2 decades of experience in life insurance. In fact, Jared and I qualified together around the time of the global financial crisis. Jared's passionate about artificial intelligence and its potential to transform how we work. And he brought this to life in his recent presentation, The Artificial Actuary at the Actuary Summit. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for having me.
Jared, a lot's changed since we qualified back in, what was it, 2009? The whole
Yeah,
working world's changed.
15 years. It's very different.
Yeah, yeah.
The industry is different, society is different. And I think it's about to change. I think in another 15 years, it's going to look very different again.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't stay the same for very long, does it? And I think if you think back to 2009, we were going through a global financial crisis. That felt like a big change at the time too. And, you
Yeah.
know, changing job security for actuaries and, what's the industry going to do and how's the economy going to bounce back? And little did we know we had still so much more ahead with COVID and changing working from home. Um, yeah, so much has changed. And now we've got AI ahead of us.
Yep, it's just the start of another round of significant change.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts on AI and some tips and advice that you have for actuaries around that in this interview, Jared. But first, I'd love to hear how do you use your actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world?
I love that. I love that question. I would say I think my actuarial superpower is my ability to identify the real underlying issues,
Okay.
and that helps myself and others focus on what's really important.
Mm,
I find that most of the time people are not talking about the real underlying issue. People are talking about the surface issue, and that leads to a lot of spinning wheels, wasting time. If you're not trying to identify what the real underlying issue is, you're very unlikely to solve your problem. And it's not always easy because it's not always as simple as, there's one underlying root cause.
mm,
And people have different opinions about, what the underlying problem is. But at least if you're having that conversation, you're moving in the right direction. If you're not even having that conversation, that's when I've seen before, just teams just constantly spinning wheels, going around in circles, not making progress,
mm,
or just seeing the same theme pop up over and over again
mm.
because the underlying issue was never really addressed.
Yeah, interesting. Can you give us an example?
Well, probably the best example, and the one I think the one I come across quite often is lack of clarity on accountability, and in particular, who has the ability to make a decision. That ends up being, I think, the root cause of a lot of problems, because either people don't know who to go to actually get direction or get a decision made.
Mm,
And in some cases, people don't realize that they actually have the autonomy to be the one to make that decision.
yeah.
I think the world, yeah, as I'm saying, the world's changed a lot. It becomes more complex within organizations. There's a lot more. You can't operate in a silo,
Right.
but that in itself, I think, then makes it hard for people to make decisions, because
Mm,
a lot of decisions are never clear cut.
mm,
There's a lot of judgment involved.
mm,
But yeah, just not having that clarity around can, who should make a decision and who has the
mm, mm.
accountability, I think is a common theme that I see.
Yeah. And so one of your superpowers is getting to the bottom of what the issue is and actually
Yeah.
getting to the crux of it so that you can solve it.
Yeah, or at least trying to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that. I want to talk about your session from the Actuary Summit, the Artificial Actuary, and I was disappointed to miss it because I was also presenting another concurrent session at the same time. But there was so much buzz after your session, Jared. I mean, I was talking to senior actuaries afterwards who were just, really so enthusiastic and so inspired by what you'd shown them in that presentation. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about a little bit about the presentation itself for those that missed it, but also what drove your passion and interest in AI.
Yeah, so the presentation, so it was titled The Artificial Actuary, and I was really keen to demonstrate what you can do with AI within the actuarial field. There's a lot of talk about it, but I really wanted to demonstrate it. So what I built an application, sort of this artificial actuarial team,
Yep.
as I referred to it. And it was a diverse team of artificial actuaries, and they all had sort of different skill sets, right? In the same way that, a team of regular actuaries have a diverse set of skill sets. And I'd given these artificial actuaries access to various tools. So they had access to a projection model. So, they could do a lot more than just, I think you think about AI and you might think about ChatGPT and just, being able to have a chat back and forth. And those models are sort of very much text-based, right? You're putting words in and you're getting words out. But when you allow access to tools like a projection model or to data analytics tools where they can then, produce graphs, produce tables, you can do a lot more. And so I used the example of a sort of a generic repricing exercise where this team of artificial actuaries with access to these various tools was able to go through, review sort of, review some past experience around claim rates, and then recommend new actuarial assumptions going forward, and then run these projection models to determine the profitability of the portfolio. And then given some constraints around sort of a target profitability, that will then they sort of had the tools to go and perform a reprice, determine what change in premium rates is required to get that portfolio back to profitability. And then importantly, it was about then bringing all of that analysis and all those recommendations together into one final Word document as an output. And that was another sort of tool that I had to provide this team of artificial actuaries, and one of the members of the team was a report writer that was
Yep.
then able to, because they can collaborate. Okay, so they can share the information. The report writer, gathered all the information performed by all the other artificial actuaries and put it together in this neat sort of 25-page repricing
Yeah.
report. And it's a good example of what really piqued my interest and passion in AI, which is that I sort of very early on, sort of early last year, I sort of had the realization that I can achieve a lot more by leveraging AI, and I can be a lot more ambitious in what I try to undertake, and I can be a lot more confident in pursuing it
Mm.
because you can use it in areas where you otherwise wouldn't have the time or the skills. And so the presentation is probably the best example I've got of that, because if I didn't have access to AI, I would never have contemplated trying to build the application in the first place
Mm.
because I would not have had the time. I wouldn't have thought that I'd have the time and the skills. And having gone through it now, I know that I was right. I would never have been able to build it. I used AI extensively throughout it. Probably 80% of the code behind the application was written by sort of either ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot.
Right.
And I came across many sort of, many stumbling blocks, many problems along the
Mm.
way, that I needed AI's assistance with and advice on options for dealing with it.
Mm.
So I think everyone's interest in AI can be different, right? You can use it for a broad range of things, but I think what's common is the fact that, yeah, it can enable people to do more, and it can enable people to be more confident and pursue goals that they otherwise wouldn't pursue.
Mm.
Whatever those goals happen to be, I think it's the confidence that it gives you, I think
Yeah.
that's what's really piqued my interest and passion. I
Yeah.
think that's really valuable for, well, not just for actuaries, obviously, but everyone.
Yeah. So many applications, and interesting to hear how you've used AI to do the repricing exercise, but you also used AI to help you use AI to build the pricing exercise.
Build
So
AI. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's so many different ways of thinking about it. And I love that breadth of how can we use AI? It's not just to do something, it's to help us with a broader function. And I will talk about that a little bit later as well. But I think it sounds like what you did with that presentation was that you brought an abstract concept. We're all talking about AI. There's a lot of talk about AI, but there's not a lot of concrete examples yet about how we can use it. And I think what you did was you actually brought it to life for people in a way that we could see and understand. And even though I wasn't there live for your presentation, I've since caught up your presentation. And I liked the way that you also talked about how having a team of artificial actuaries, they don't take lunch breaks, they don't get sick. I mean, it's a really interesting way of thinking about what our teams might look like going forward.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I was trying to push the boundary on what I could do with AI alone, so AI
Mm,
on its own. But you can achieve a lot. You can achieve even more if you're then thinking about all those team members, actually, artificial team members as assistants to, human
yeah,
team members. So that's really the next level is combining, kind of getting the best of both worlds
yeah.
and having that human in the loop. You
Mm.
could achieve a lot. Yeah, you can achieve even more than what I was able to achieve just from trying to push the boundary of AI on its own.
Just by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose in the same way that we now work in a hybrid way, we work in the office, we work from home. I imagine that we'll have hybrid teams of AI and humans going forward as well.
Yeah, I expect so.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So, one of the questions you asked at the start and answered at the end in your session, Jared, was are actuaries becoming an endangered species?
Yeah.
Do you think AI will ever completely replace actuaries?
I think the easy and the comforting answer to that would be to say no. And to say, well, humans, so actuaries possess these, deeply human qualities, right? Like this sort of intuition, this actuarial judgment, as we often refer to it, which we develop from years of study and experience.
Mm,
It's easy to say, well, yeah, that complex decision making, that actuarial judgment, you can never have AI replace that.
mm,
But I don't think it's that clear cut. And because you could say the same of many professions,
mm,
and I'll use doctors as an example, because similarly, years of experience and years of study, and doctors are forming complex judgments and really important judgments, right? Like it is impacting people's health.
mm,
The thing with doctors is there's a large societal benefit to having AI being able to replicate or support what doctors do, right? Because you could be talking about getting healthcare to a billion people in the world that otherwise don't have it. So there's already a lot of research and investment going into AI within the medical profession.
yeah,
And there's already studies where AI on certain aspects can outperform human doctors. And one of the reasons for that is because it doesn't fall for sort of the biases that humans often fall for. Now, so AI is not yet replacing doctors, but my point is there's a large society, there's large incentives to invest in research in AI that can replace or replicate that decision-making element of what doctors do.
mm,
And if or when you've done that, well, that same capability would quite easily translate across to the actuarial field. So just because there's no headlines about, AI performing better than human actuaries, I think it's valuable to pay attention to what's happening in other fields
mm,
to think about how that technology will transfer across to
mm.
actuaries. So I think we're lucky because society doesn't benefit a great deal if you can suddenly replicate actuaries. But hey, maybe I'm sure there's people in the world who can't currently access actuarial services, and
Yep.
maybe one day they'll be able to access AI actuarial services that benefits them.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
honestly I think it becomes more a question of when rather than if, and more what does that trajectory look like?
Mm,
So I think, yeah, at some point the role of an actuary will look very, very different to
Mm,
what it does
mm.
today.
As I'm sure the role of the actuary today looks very different to what it looked like, say, 100 years ago. I mean,
Yeah,
100 years ago, we wouldn't have had laptops on our desks. So many different things, so many new tools that we use today and take for granted as actuaries that we have at our fingertips that speed
yeah,
things up for us. And I guess that's, yeah, AI is just an extension of that, but with some different nuances again.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Interesting. As I was listening to your presentation and thinking about the idea of, setting up a team of artificial actuaries that don't need lunch breaks and don't get sick and don't have to do the daycare run and all those other challenges that human actuaries regularly need to face, and human managers need to allow for and account for. It just got me thinking about, because I teach actuaries as they're stepping into their first management roles. I teach delegation, I teach some of those management skills, and then I teach senior leaders how they can kind of present to broader stakeholders as well. And I was thinking, we might think that we're in the future going to be managing artificial actuaries, but what if we've got artificial managers managing us?
Yeah, I think there can be an element of that.
Mm,
Because if you think about senior management, senior leadership, one of the challenges in being in any senior leadership role is you don't have the time to
mm,
be across, everything that's happening within your organization.
mm,
But that's a problem that's much more easily solved with
mm.
AI.
Right.
And so this idea of, almost sort of an artificial organization that is assisted by people, doing the tasks that people are more suited to, and
Mm.
making sure that there's that sort of human in the loop, and you have that governance. I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, yeah. But even as you were describing, Jared, about, what you needed to do with your artificial actuaries, information you needed to give them, access to certain tools. I mean,
Yeah,
that's analogous to us as managers briefing our junior team members as
yeah.
well and upskilling them as well. But broader than just management skills, like what skills do you think actuaries need so that we can leverage the benefits of AI?
Leverage it. I think it's important to start on to sort of to learn what different AI models can do and what they can't do,
Hmm.
and what they're good at, what they're not good at, but
Mm,
importantly, why they're not good at it. Because if you understand why an AI model is not good at a certain task that you may have expected it would be good at,
mm,
if you understand why, you'll have a much better intuition about whether it will be useful for other tasks in the future. So
mm,
I guess to learn that, to sort of get that understanding of why they're good at certain things, why they're not good at certain things. I think it helps I think it does help to have a basic understanding of how these models work. And
mm,
so taking large language models as an example, understanding the data that they were trained on,
mm,
understanding how recent that data was, whether that model has access to real-time data or not.
mm,
Because you might, a very simple thing might be you want a quick summary of recent world events. There's no point asking a model that doesn't have access to real-time data that
right.
question. Understanding whether it does have access to tools as we've been describing. So I think even the free version of ChatGPT now has access to data analytic tools. So it's a lot more than just a chatbot. You can
Mm,
ask it to analyze CSV files for you. You
mm,
can ask it to produce graphs. You can
mm,
save those files back to your desktop.
mm,
So, so models are now, starting to bring in those tools sort of natively
mm,
within the environment.
mm,
Understanding whether or not, what sort of memory the models have. Whether the model has been given or has access to your prior conversations with it.
yeah.
Because if it doesn't, and you're expecting that it does, you'll be expecting, well, why doesn't it already know this about me?
Mm,
Um, so there's a few sort of basics to understanding, what the model's can do and what they can't do.
mm,
And it helps you sort of develop that understanding of why they're good at some things, why they're not good at certain things.
mm,
And I think it's important to then experiment. It's like anything, like you learn by doing.
mm,
And there's a lot of good free courses out there. A lot of courses about sort of simple prompt engineering.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of that presentation, a lot of that application I've built for the presentation, a lot of it is prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is this idea around sort of crafting the question or crafting the input that you provide a large language model, crafting it in a way that sort of maximizes or gives you the output you're looking for. So one of the examples I used was around, these models are naturally very verbose and creative and expressive.
Yep.
That's great, right? And that's why there's all these concerns about, kids cheating on their creative writing homework.
Yeah.
But they don't naturally write in a way that would be useful in a business environment,
Yes.
which is for most actuaries, that
That's what
would be the
they're
sort
doing.
of writing that they're interested in. But through some prompt engineering, right, so sort of describing the role that you want the model to play, describing the type of output that you're looking for, that extra context in the prompt can mean that you can get a piece of writing that looks very, very different
Mm,
to the writing, to the output that you get if you don't give it all that extra context.
mm, mm.
So you learn by experimenting. Probably maybe one of the biggest learnings I've got from experimenting is it took me a while, but after I sort of realized after a while, these models that they have a bias to action. So they have a bias to answer your question.
Okay.
They're trained to and they'll always answer your question, right? If you're
Yep.
chatting with ChatGPT or
I'll
Claude
give
or
you an
Gemini,
answer.
whatever, they'll give you an answer.
Yeah.
They're not trained to challenge you on whether you're asking the right question.
Ah, yeah.
And
Yep.
so over time, and they're always enthusiastic in their
Yep.
reply. And so
Yep.
over time, you're constantly asking questions, you're constantly getting answers. It makes you feel like you're asking good questions.
Yep.
Makes you feel like you're smarter than what you actually are.
Yeah. Yep.
And so they can be quite easy to sort of lead down a certain
Mm,
path. Yeah,
mm,
because they're not trained. And if you've not provided enough context, it can't challenge you on whether you're asking the
mm,
right
mm.
question anyway.
Yep.
So there's some of these sort of nuances that you only learn from experimenting and
Mm,
using it in a way that is going to be useful for you, right? Everyone's use case or
yep.
sort of value from it is different.
Yeah. Yeah. Always good to play with it and understand how it works. And yeah, I think in my experience, I've also noticed that ChatGPT can give you a very polished looking answer. It's not
Mhm.
always accurate. And so one of the
That's
things,
right.
I'm the chief examiner for communication, modeling, and professionalism for the Actuaries Institute. And so one of the things I got my students to do last semester was to critique some output from ChatGPT. I put the
Oh,
question
yeah.
that I might have asked the students to answer for their assignment, I put the question into ChatGPT and gave them what ChatGPT gave as output, which looked very lovely and polished, and asked them to critique it. What's wrong with it? What's missing from it? It looks great, but it's not fully right. So what do you do with it? And I think, that's those sorts of review skills will be very important for us, even if we don't see ourselves as future people managers. I think we all need to learn those skills to be able to make sure we understand what the tools are doing and to be able to review the output and sense check it and change it so that we can own what's coming out of it, even if we're using it as a tool.
Yeah, it's right. Like everyone kind of becomes a manager in that sense. So people develop the ability to critique what people in their team are providing them.
Mm.
It's the same. It's the same analogy. You need to develop that skill to critique what an AI model is giving you.
Yeah.
And to my point around sort of understanding a bit about how they work, what they're good at, what they're not good at, that makes you much faster and much better at knowing if you know their weaknesses. It's
Yep.
it's 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 like people in your team. Right? You know what people are good at and what they're not
Yep.
good at. So
Yep.
you know what to focus on when someone gives you a piece of work because you know what's potentially going to be lacking.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
the same with AI models.
Yep. Yep. So I want to talk a bit more about leadership, but before I do, you mentioned, some ways that people can learn how to write better prompts. What are some examples of courses or tools or ways that actuaries can do that? Do you have some examples, or can we put them in the show notes?
Uh, it's funny. I got into AI very early on, so I've never really done any of the courses. But Google, Microsoft, they all have fairly highly regarded sort of introduction to generative AI
Mm.
courses.
Mhm.
But one of the things about the large language models is they're getting much more up to date on the data they're trained on. So that means they're trained now
Yep.
on information on the internet about prompt engineering.
Mm.
18 months ago, you couldn't ask a large language, you couldn't ask ChatGPT advice on prompt engineering
Right.
because of the billions data set.
Yeah.
So you can actually just, again, you can use AI
Use
to
AI
sort of
to use AI.
teach it. Yeah. And so there's a lot of good sort of prompt engineering frameworks out there, but
Mhm.
they kind of all cover there's a couple of core elements to it. One is about describing the role that you want the model to play. And that was in my presentation. That was sort of, the different artificial actuaries that have different skill sets. That's the different roles that you're wanting a model to play.
Yep. So
Um,
one example of that for our listeners, one of the
so
roles.
so one of the roles might be you you might want the model to be a coach. So you might want it to be critiquing you. You might have a piece of writing. So this is probably good. This is an example that I would often use it for. Is I might want feedback on a piece of writing that I've written.
Mhm.
So I could just say, give me some, how can I make this writing better?
Mhm.
But a better prompt would be to say, I'd like you to take on the role of a writing coach
Mm.
and provide critical feedback on my writing. Um, and in that way, yeah, you're describing the role you want it to play. You're being very clear in the task or sort of the action that you want it to take. Um, and you need to, or it's helpful to also sort of explain, give it extra context. So give it context around, why you're writing, this particular piece and what it's for, and give it information about what expected outcome you want. If
Mhm.
do you want its feedback in some structured form? Do you want it to give feedback on, say, five particular areas?
Mm.
So if you think a little bit more about the prompt that you put in, you sort of, information about the role, specifics about the task, context around the task, and what your expected outcome is, you'll get a much more useful
Mm.
response.
Mm. Mm.
And you can, once you do that a bit, you can have that as a standard template, more or less.
Yep.
So that every time you have a piece of writing, you've got that template to input alongside with that particular piece of writing.
Yeah. Interesting. And still so many parallels to how we manage our teams and the
Yeah,
sort of checklist of questions we might have in our heads when we're delegating some work or reviewing some work as well. So, some transferable skills there, I can see.
definitely.
So, okay, so let's talk a bit more about leadership then. Jared, how do you see the role of leaders changing as AI becomes more widely adopted?
I I think it becomes more challenging and and it becomes a more critical skill. So I've been leading teams for probably more than 10 years now. And I find it much harder now than when I was starting out. The world's changed, right? We were saying that at the start. There's a lot more uncertainty. There's a lot more ambiguity. People naturally seek clarity, and I find it's harder to give people clarity these days
Mm.
on what's going to happen. And that's now, right? Before AI has started to be widely adopted. So
Mhm.
as AI starts to become adopted, it becomes I think it takes those challenges to a new level, I think. And a couple of reasons. One is because AI is a societal change, and because there's no playbook for embedding AI. So on the point about it's a societal change, so it's not people have people have experience in managing change within their organization, right? Or managing change within their that's occurring within their industry. But this is a societal change, right? This means for a lot of people, their first exposure or their introduction to AI may well come from outside of the workplace. So especially if you've got kids
Yep.
and challenges around cheating and whatnot in school and how our schools are dealing with that problem, that can be your first exposure to
Mm.
AI.
Mm.
Others will experience AI in different ways. And so as a leader, you're leading people through this societal change, and everyone's attitudes, everyone's experiences with it is quite it can be really varied.
Mm, mm,
And then you sort of couple that with the fact that it's a new technology, and so there is no playbook for how to embed it within an organization or how to extract the most value out of it. Organizations are trying to figure that out as they go along.
mm,
So again, you've got more uncertainty, you've got more ambiguity. It's really hard to give people clarity on whether it will. Yeah, some people are concerned,
mm, mm,
but it's really hard to give that clarity to people. So I think yeah, I think leadership becomes more challenging. It becomes more critical. So yeah, so the question then becomes, okay, well, what do you do?
mm.
And I guess traditional change leadership principles still apply. Being open, being transparent, acknowledging that you don't know the answers, that your organization doesn't know the answers, helping people understand the fact that there is no playbook. Um, I think can be helpful.
Mm.
And I think even if you're not, I mean, AI is not, it's not for everyone. Everyone's not, you don't have to be interested in it. But even if you're not interested in it, I still think as a leader, it's still going to be valuable and important for your leadership skills to have an understanding of AI and to have the conversations with people in your team about their experiences with their thoughts on it, their attitudes towards it.
Mm.
Because I get, like any change that an individual in your team might be going through, it's obviously helpful for you to try and understand it from their perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think even as a leader, yeah, even if you're not really interested or passionate about AI, I think it's still important to pay some attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like your point, Jared, about it being a societal change. We think about AI as what it's doing for our technical actuarial work, but really it's affecting so much more than that. And
Yeah.
that means it's affecting so much more of all of our lives, not just ours, but the people in our team, the people that are working for us, people outside the actuarial team. And you gave a great example of that in your presentation around, what if someone else outside the actuarial team uses AI to do some of your work? Then where do you go from there? So, and that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah, that's right. If yeah, the quote from the presentation was if you can use AI to help assist you with tasks that's currently someone else's
Yep.
role,
Yep.
well, yeah, someone else can use AI to assist them with tasks that's currently your role, and they
Yours.
don't have an actuarial background.
Yeah, yeah. So we can't ignore this. Even if we're not interested in it, we need to think about it more broadly and how it affects our work and those around us. And so you talked about this being a broader issue, still in the workplace though, like beyond actuarial work. Is there a role for actuaries in supporting AI adoption more broadly within their company or
Yeah,
within the industry?
I'm a big believer of actuaries that actuaries should be at the forefront, really
Mm.
leading this across their
At the
organization.
forefront. Mm.
Yeah, because AI adoption, sort of most of the frameworks sort of talk about this. There's three elements that you need. So one is around technical expertise, one is around sort of governance and risk management, and the other is around sort of domain knowledge and business knowledge.
Mm.
And actuaries already have experience and skills in all three of those
Mm.
areas.
Mm.
So I don't think it means actuaries need to have a detailed understanding of the transformer architecture behind underpinning large language models, but actuaries have skill but they are models, and actuaries deal with models all the time. So sure, the models are different. You put words in and you get words out. We're used to models, putting numbers in and
Numbers
getting
in, numbers
numbers
out.
out. But they're still models. And so principles around model validation,
Mm.
around model change control, it's important to manage change. If you've got one of these large language models underpinning a production application, every time there's a new version of that model, you need to go through a change control process.
Mm. Mm.
And you need to design modeling workflows. And so again, in my presentation, it wasn't just about sort of one model. Each team member is essentially a separate model, and they're an end-to-end workflow. And
Mm.
actuaries are used to and already have a lot of experience in dealing with end-to-end modeling workflows.
Mm. Mm.
So that technical capability translates across to to AI models. And then uh, governance and risk management. Obviously, actuaries have strong appreciation for risk management, strong appreciation for regulations and legislation, and that is starting to come with AI, and an appreciation for the ethical side and sort of the responsible use of AI.
Mm,
And then the third element around sort of domain knowledge and business knowledge, that's important in implementing AI because that's how you help sort of identify, where you're going to extract the most value from within your
mm,
organization.
mm,
And actuaries naturally have a good understanding of their end-to-end business. You need to understand. So taking insurance as an example, you need to have an understanding of how underwriting fits in, how claims fits in, how your customer service fits in. And so that sort of business knowledge and domain knowledge is something that actuaries already have.
mm,
So these are the key areas. These are the key skills that organizations are going to need as they start embedding AI. And these are skills that actuaries already have.
yeah,
And as I was saying earlier, if you don't start using AI to support you in other work, well, other people are going to start
someone
using
else
it
will. Yeah.
to, to do actuarial work. So I think there's a really big opportunity for actuaries. So yeah, not just about how can AI help you do your actuarial work better.
Mm,
How
mm,
can you use your actuarial skills
mm,
to drive AI adoption?
mm, mm. Yep. So transferable. All that domain knowledge and everything that we do around models that can all be lifted and applied to utilizing AI models as well. Excellent. So, Jared, what would you say though to people who are skeptical or concerned about the implications of AI?
It depends on why. So it's obviously important to understand why. I mean, skepticism. I mean, I think people that are skeptical is generally because it's skepticism around it's all just hype and
Mm,
it's not really going to have as big an impact as people are saying. To that, I would say don't not to focus on what the technology can currently do.
mm,
It's about what the technology is expected and anticipated to be able to do in the future, right?
right.
And so it's the pace of um, it's the pace of change. And so just the amount of investment and research that's going into these models and you look at how much they've progressed in the past 18 months, it's
So
dramatic.
far.
And look, exponential growth doesn't continue forever, but everyone close to the field is expecting that exponential growth to keep going for a while yet.
Mm,
And so, yeah, if there was never any more advancements beyond the models we have today, then it's probably not going to be world changing. But everyone is anticipating. And there's already been sort of models that have been showcased that haven't been released to the public yet.
right.
So there's just yeah, there's too much focus on it to say that it's not gonna go anywhere and it's not going to progress dramatically from where it's today. So
Yep.
I think that's the key about the sort of the skepticism. I think
Yep.
you could easily be skeptical about the value of today's technology,
Yep.
but it's the future technology.
Yep.
For
Yep.
people that are concerned, and again, there's quite different reasons to be concerned, right? People might be concerned about the impact on them and their role,
Mm,
and to that, I would say to embrace it and to start developing the skills that there's this, the cliche saying around AI won't replace jobs, but people who can use AI will replace people who can't. And so if you're concerned about the impact on your role, I think the best course of action is to embrace it.
embrace it.
But people can be concerned about their like the impact on their kids, for example. And what do you kids today are going, well, what should I study at university? What career do I want to have? Because I don't know what roles are going to exist in 10 or 20 years time. And to that, I think again, embracing AI and learning how to use it is valuable. But I think focusing on trying to develop a more diverse set of skill sets, trying to focus on adaptability. And so you spoke earlier about, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of ambiguity in the world. So sort of building that resilience and that adaptability, I think it's important for everyone, but for
Yeah.
particularly younger people because they've got if you haven't even entered the workforce yet,
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a critical skill.
Yeah.
And I think then, and there's people that are rightfully concerned about it's a societal change, and so it'll have societal impacts.
Mm,
So,
mm,
challenges around just fake fake news, deep fake videos, etc.
mm.
And for people that are really concerned, I mean, it's not particularly helpful to just say we'll embrace it, but I think it's still helpful to have an understanding of the technology because that's what's going to help you. I sort of have the skills to identify, potential scams and
Yeah,
phishing exercises, for example. I mean, 10 years ago, like, everyone today knows, don't click a link in an
right.
SMS. But 10 years, everyone didn't necessarily, people didn't
Yeah,
necessarily think.
we all had to learn that. Yeah.
You'll have to learn it. And so I think it's the same. It like any technological change, it'll have positives and it'll have
Mm,
negatives.
mm.
But having some understanding of technology, I think helps
Yeah.
sort of helps us spot the negatives. But coming to that point about leadership, if I that's probably the hardest area. So if people are concerned from a societal perspective,
Mm,
to be honest, I don't have the best answers for that right now. I think that's probably the hardest class of people to lead and help navigate through
mm,
the change.
mm, mm. So it sounds like we can't really stick our head in the sand. We need to embrace AI, both at work and outside. But I want to finish with one question for you, Jared, and it's this. What's your top tip for actuaries wanting to embrace AI at work?
Yeah, my top tip would be to think of it as much more than just an assistant or a co-pilot, which is the common phrase now. So I can do a lot of things for you, right? It can help you write code. It can help you write emails. It can summarize large documents. It can help you write, it can rewrite things for you to make it sound better. And then there are really good things to use it for, but they're all examples of where AI is assisting you. You're in the driver's seat, which is where this whole co-pilot sort of analogy comes from. But the real value in it, I think, comes from realizing that you can use it as a teacher, as a coach or an advisor. And if you think about the role of a human teacher versus a human assistant, that's two very different roles. And so, getting AI to teach you means that you're developing a new skill, you're developing a broader range of skills. And so I think it's sort of both. So obviously there's a lot of areas where it can be an assistant, and that's great. But thinking about where it can also teach you.
Mm.
And the irony, and the reason I love that idea so much of AI as a teacher is the irony is because if you're utilizing AI to teach you more skills, to have a more diverse skill set, to be more adaptable, well, then you're utilizing AI to help you become less susceptible to being replaced
Yep,
by AI.
that's great.
That's the value of AI as a teacher.
Yeah, fantastic. Such great advice, Jared. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, tips, reflections, and thoughts about AI and how we can use it in today's episode. I'm sure your reflections are going to be really helpful for a lot of actuaries and beyond. So thank you for your
Okay.
time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.